Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whenever y'all decide to watch this video. If you do decide to watch this video, which I hope you do, because tonight, I should say, we will be talking about gaming, cooking, and really whatever else crosses the path of our conversation. Um, I hope everybody had a good day today. I hope everybody has a good Easter. But let's talk about some let's start with food because food's always good.
Roasted halfling as you play a dragonborn. No.
You're right.
Sorry.
Speaking of, oh my God. So I haven't read all of it. I know Max over at Legion Friday Night Chill did a show about it, but they're wanting to, or the WotC uh, people are wanting to get rid of half races.
I've heard that, but when I'm beginning to, this is my feeling for it. What they're really going to be doing is kind of what Pathfinder does. They're going to be kind of doing an ancestry, and you get to pick if you're like a half elf. You pick whether you're going elf or you pick if you're going to go human. That's kind of the idea. I think that's the way that they're going to do with it. The problem that I have with so many of these is like you're talking about with clickbait. Let me see what actually comes out. It's the everyone blows things out of proportion, and with the exception of the OGL, which really deserved to get blown, and it was completely in proportion for what they were doing. That's a very different thing. But I look at some of the changes and I just go, okay, first off, you don't like the game, but then you talk about it and say, well, how is this influencing other games? I'd rather him talk about how does this influence other games. But let's be, this is where I always get mad at it. There are more games out there now that people are playing than there have ever been. I can select everything from Symbaroum, which by the way, when we talk about 5e, what can you play? You can play the One Ring 5e. So, it doesn't match up the token. Guess what? You got the One Ring, which is using 5e material to play JRR tokens, Lord of the Rings. It's not gritty enough. Well, that's true, except you got Symbaroum, which has a 5e version. I want steampunk. Guess what? Iron Kingdoms has a 5e version. Um, they've got all these different versions, and people are buying them. So what do I care?
Yeah, I just bought a Kickstarter. I just threw money in for a Kickstarter that will give me Celtic gods mythology for 5e, so I can run a Celtic base. Just because it's, I mean, I like 5e because it's such a vanilla system. It's easy to understand. This is my peanut butter. What jam do you want to throw on top of it?
And I'm going to mention one thing is, which I have to. That's where I always make fun of with Max. Well, I want it to be like Tolkien. Well, you came in second edition. Go look at the old D&D. They had green Martians. Remember how we all watched John Carter?
Yeah.
They had green Martians. They had lasers. They had a crashed spaceship. It was all the Gonzo stuff that was supposed to be out there, which people forget about. And when they say, "Well, it was too Gonzo," yes, because you're thinking it from a 2E edition. That's not how D&D started off as. It was kind of the universal. It was at the time. It was the only role-playing game, and they mixed and mashed everything together. And it's and then I can play this, or I can play that. And I think sometimes we forget what's in there because we don't look back at it. The old Dungeon Master's Guide had rules for firearms and lasers and stuff like that. So,
unfortunately, it's like the Dungeons and Dragons movie that just came out. I saw it not as many times as I've seen Cocaine Bear. I saw that.
Is it fun? That's all that matters.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. I mean, I got the popcorn.
I saw the popcorn die you had. Now, for me, I said I will not support things. That's great. I'm just not going to go to the movie theater just because. The older I get, especially when I start looking at how long some of these movies are, I have to go pee. I want to stop, and I can't pause the movie. I'm spoiled in that aspect.
It has a really fast. I have to say, the movie has a really fast pace.
Everything I've heard is it's a good, fun movie, which is what we wanted from D&D. And when I hear, well, I want it to realistic. Okay, I understand that, but guess what? No one goes sees those movies. Go look at Dragon Slayer. which is I don't know. I don't think that's one that we've looked at. Dragon Slayer's kind of slow. We have those movies already out there. You can watch Dragon Slayer. You can watch Excalibur. You can watch Conan. You've got a few others out there. It's you can watch Dragonheart.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Dragonheart, but I don't think I'd put anybody really through that.
Well, but I mean, if you want a more serious game, you kind of those are Dragonheart's a little bit lighthearted for some of it, but it's we've got a lot of these things, and
Yeah.
okay, is it like you said, is oh I don't want to Guardians of the Galaxy? Well, yeah, but if you're gonna make a niche movie, guess what? They don't ever make it. If which is true is Ben-Hur is great. I love it, but people also have to remember, very much like Passion of the Christ, whether you like it or not, it appealed to a large group that would see it either once or multiple times.
The problem I have with people regarding it to Guardians of the Galaxy formula, we had formula that movie before. It was called Ocean's 11 and Ocean's 12 and 4. It was called Italian Job. It was called every team up movie known in cinema history had the same formula that they used for Guardians of the Galaxy. Only difference between Ocean 11 and Guardians of the Galaxy are the how should I put this?
The setting.
The setting, yeah, the setting. And that's about it. That's really what it. So you have a D&D movie that has a team, a bunch of and
I haven't seen it myself, so it's,
what
I haven't seen it myself, so I'm relying on you to tell me.
Michelle Rodriguez played a barbarian, not giving anything away. We all knew that, and she played it correctly. She honestly played a barbarian the way you think a barbarian would have. Her fascination with halflings, I think, was kind of weird, but whatever.
That's the whenever people say, well, I want to play a serious game, well, okay, fine, what type of serious game do you want to play? And everyone's game is different, and like I said, I've said over and over again, 5e is Harry Potter, and I'm not trying to when you look at it is. And there's nothing wrong with it. Most players don't want to, if you don't want to play Harry Potter, go. And whether we like it or not, WotC owns all versions of D&D. So guess what? You want to play first edition? Boom. And if you don't want to play WotC's version, I have plenty of knockoffs that work just as well. I've got Dungeon Crawl Classics, Mutant Crawl Classics, so I'll count that as one. I've got OSE. Okay, I've got that. And I said, okay, what's wrong with it? It's just have fun with it. The whole point of why I liked role-playing games was it used to bring friends together, even if we disagreed about politics, that we would have a commonality, we could hang out and have fun together. In this whole world where they want to separate everyone into little camps, they all want to fight with each other, just quit it. You know what? If you're gonna be a miserable, if you're gonna be miserable, I don't want you in my game.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I mean, no offense, you can be a miserable bastard. That doesn't mean we can't have fun. But if you can be a miserable bastard at the table, it's just like whenever you have the depressed drunk. Guess what? We don't invite you over for the wine tasting, all right? Because you're a miserable drunk. If you're the happy drunk, you get invited all the time. It's the same thing for games.
Yeah, it really is. I don't know. I think I don't know what happened. I mean, it's funny. Earlier today, I took my daughter. Before I went to work, I took my daughter to go see the Mario Brother movie.
Okay, what did you think of that one?
It's a kids movie. I mean,
okay.
It's already 10 times better than the original attempt. Oh my god!
Well, that's a pretty low bar.
But it was good. It's funny. I mean, it hit a lot of the old.
Well, and let's be honest. There are some movies that I just don't want to go see.
Right.
Mario never interested me. Sonic the Hedgehog. It doesn't matter how good they are. They just don't.
If it's not your bag, it's not your bag.
Exactly. I just and the other part is I'm not going to go see it. If it goes on the movie, that's fine. I still haven't seen Avengers Endgame. Um,
You might
and
want
that
to see
was
that one at your house where you have a bathroom.
well. My friend has it. Whenever he gets it on there, I'll go through. Um, there, what the part of it for me at least is what gets me out that I want to watch a movie. The last movie, I guess I say these two. Not that one of them I don't mind watching on a smaller screen. You know, as we get everything up in this world where is was Dune. Dune was
Oh yeah, Dune 2 is supposed to be coming out.
well, I just told my mother she's not allowed to die until they're done making the Dune movies. Um, well, my mother is a huge Dune fanatic.
Oh
She
right.
and we're talking about this was from when she dragged me to go see the 1984 film in the theater.
That
Uh,
movie is just bad. I'm sorry, but that movie was just.
well, the long version that they finally put on the television, I thought was good because it explained a lot of things. The theatrical version is terrible because they cut too much into it that it just feels completely disjointed. Um,
What killed that movie for me was the traveler or the guy who folds space around them. One being literally looked like it came out of its mouth, and one being looked like it went out into his ass. And I'm like, I this is I
well, actually, the idea of it folding space because he never really described it. uh, They kind of moved that in the other part, but I like the fact that they kind of look like fish. And actually, that very thing is, if you look at Dune, Dune opened up so many things out there. Everyone talks about Flash Gordon and John Carter. People forget Dune's even referenced in Star Wars. Um, where he talks about the Spice Run,
yeah, I,
that's that
I
they
yeah.
even do that. Okay, fine. You steal little bits and pieces here. Dune is a very political book. It gets into a lot of aspects, but I like that. But what kind of I like the movie. I that was the one I went in the theater that I felt that I had to go see it in the theater to get that full experience. But I really did enjoy doing the movie. That said, is I wish they'd had more dialogue, um, and I wish that they had gotten more into the traitor like they did in the original movie. Um, 'Cause
Yeah, had the guy from Quantum Leap in it. Al.
yes, well, but the I don't know. Have you read the Dune book or listened to it?
I've been meaning to. I know it gets weird. I know it really gets weird as the series continues.
Yeah, but everyone I've listened to is it's really a trilogy for number one. The other parts we've looked into some of the psychedelics and things because I know that he did some of that stuff.
Yeah.
You can, and now that we're starting to learn things that we didn't even know, like epigenetics, go look that up. If it's a very traumatic event, it actually rewrites your DNA.
I've heard about that. I haven't exactly looked into it, but I've heard of that phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah, phenomenon. If it's
Yeah.
singular or phenomena, if they're multiple. But there's actually things like if you fought off a bear and it can actually imprint into your DNA, which is really cool, which also explains why some people are afraid of certain animals just instinctually.
I
Um,
yeah, I mean that's interesting. I don't know what damage a snake did to me, but yeah, me and snakes don't.
well, it doesn't have to be that snake damage to you did to you at this time. It's just that one of your ancestors, hundreds of years ago, had a terrible experience with it,
Oh,
and and they somehow survived, and that got imprinted in the DNA that's passed on to you as part of the that's what they're thinking has occurred. So it's kind of a cool idea that not only does it go from there, that also applies whenever you look at Alien, of you're beginning to pass some of your knowledge genetically to your offspring without them ever realizing it.
There is a series of games, the Assassin's Creed,
Yeah.
kind of touched on that genetic the history of your bloodline is in your genetics.
Yes.
I mean, which is kind of cool. And I'm like, wow, that's a great possibility. In the back of my head, I'm thinking, yeah, I'm not doing it. My family hasn't done anything cool. We're a bunch of dirt farmers.
Well, but those are the things that, well, but your dirt farmers may have some of the things, but I think that there's some aspect to that it's really the imprinting, which is a cool idea. Now, how much or what percentage, I don't think anyone really knows, but just the fact that they have that, and it does touch on some of these things of why can the Bene Gesserit only go down the women's line, but the Quetzai Haderach can also go down the male line,
Right.
and for the genetic memory, and that's what they do. That's one of the things they talk about. The Bene Gesserits are passing from the water of life from one mother to the other. I mean, there's some really cool aspects to it, but it's a very political book. It's if you want massive action, that's not really necessarily the book. And he went over the ecology. He did a lot of stuff. It's very cool. And my mother had the
I like authors that actually put the work in. I think when we did God the Michael Crichton, not Crichton, timeline.
yeah, Michael Crichton, yeah, timeline.
Yeah, I it's a long book. Having you guys trying to have you guys read that book could have been slightly problematic, but it would have been awesome all at the same time because you could just tell the guy did the work.
Well, Michael Crichton, whether it was an Andromeda Strain or whatever he did,
Yeah,
and I used to read his blog before he passed away, because it was so short. It was only 15 to, it was maybe only 5 to 15 pages that he'd write about stuff. And it was very interesting about the things that he would write about. But he was a well-learned man. He was a trained doctor, which people forget. And I don't mean PhD. He was a trained medical doctor.
right. Yeah, I
So,
knew he had a doctor's degree.
so he actually had a good medical background to bring these things up. And I think that's one of the things that allows him to do that. And he likes science, so that works out pretty well. I felt the same way when I first read the books because I was used to, on a different worlds when they had John Carter Mars. Oh, they're actually factoring in the gravity there. They're factoring in this. And I thought that was interesting. And he went through some of the other stuff in there because he thought about some of it. The same thing with whether you like Howard or not. Howard was doing a lot of his background for his Conan stuff. This was the things that they were creating their worlds in the background, and that helps. I mean, you don't have to like Harry Potter, but let's face it, she did a whole world for that.
Oh my God. Actually, it's funny you bring up Harry Potter. I kind of went off on somebody, how they were like, the house elves for da da da. I'm like, apparently you don't read much fantasy or mythology. I read fan da 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 da. I'm like, so you would, by the description, you would have to say that the house elves. Then the next thing it shuts out their mouth. They were indigent black people. I'm like, no, they were brownies from Celtic mythology.
Well, well, you can either take that or, did you ever read the Grimm's fairy tales? There are all sorts of stories about, gnomes and dwarves that would come out in the middle of the night and cobble your shoes and do your things, and you had to do. There were certain things you could not do, and if you did them, they would leave your house.
Oh yeah,
Or
I mean with the
Rumpelstiltskin.
The Dresden File book I'm reading, I'm rereading, and as of right now, because he's done a favor for the one of the courts of Fae, he has fairies come in and clean his house. But if he tells somebody that fairies are cleaning, well, I shouldn't say house, his apartment,
Yeah.
they'll up and leave.
Yeah, at that point you're like, well, there used to be certain ones like you weren't allowed to do certain aspects. You had to be in bed by a certain time. If you weren't and you saw them, then they would leave. But this is the problem of like when you're talking at the very beginning with half races, is they're getting rid of it, but they understand the word changeling, right? There
Right.
are numerous stories in it. I think the problem that we're having nowadays, in my view, is most people don't even know the mythology that these things are based off of. And they're trying to relate it to modern day, not realizing that this mythology goes back hundreds, if not thousands, or even longer years. It's like some of this stuff goes back towards the Greek era. And just like the word slave, I just thought it was funny. I was looking at it and like, you understand slavery until 1840 was in every country in the world. And the majority, and I like listening to Thomas Sowell do it, the majority of slaves were owned by their same culture. So, that's the part that I think that people
The
forget.
Celts and the Vikings had
Yeah,
it where their slaves had the opportunity to, I don't want to say earn their freedom, but kind of, earn become part of the clan. It wasn't you're now a slave forever. Your kids are a slave forever. So it was a way to.
that was true of most societies, actually. And in some cases, they even enslaved their own family members um, with the understanding that it was a certain number of years that you would go through. I mean, there's a part in the Bible where it talks about one of the characters is his slave for like 6 or 7 years. Um,
Joseph.
I can't remember which one, but it's like I think he's it's been a while. I
I
hate
keep
saying.
sorry, you said Bible and slave. My first brain was thinking of as that damn musical that I wasn't forced. Well, I was kind of forced to watch as a kid. Joseph in the Technicolor coat, where his
Oh
mother
yeah,
sold him into slavery, and
but
he
but
makes
but
good with the uh, 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 Pharaoh. Pharaoh.
well,
I
you're
don't know. It's
thinking
been
yeah, the Joseph and the Technicolor. Yeah, I know what you're talking about with the multicolored coat or whatever. And people forget just how hard it was to get a multicolor item. That requires a lot of looming. Plus, you have to deal with the thread, plus the dyeing. The 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 problem that I have with a lot of it is people think, oh, it only affects this in the United States, and go, okay, you understand slavery was ubiquitous around the world. Um, you're right. In most cases, you were a slave, and you could buy your freedom. So if I bought you for $200, you'd work for me, and then you were actually allowed in many cases to work side jobs. And after you in those side jobs would be enough that you could pay me to say, okay, you know what? You bought me for $200. Here's $200. They said, you know what? I got my $200 out of you plus my work. Here you go. You could be free. Um,
yeah.
it gets a lot more complicated. That the problem that you start getting in the United States was at a certain point they said that you couldn't release your slaves, and that's where some of it comes in there.
Funny
Um,
you mentioned that movie. I was going to suggest it.
oh no,
What
I'm
movie
afraid to.
was that?
Joseph in the Technicolor coat. I think
I
so.
know it's a musical. I didn't know they made a movie of it.
Well, that's but those were the things that were coming into this aspect, but no one wants to talk about who sold them into slavery, or the fact that the majority of African slaves went actually to the Middle East and the Ottoman Empire, not towards the West. Um, the other part that was like I was reading something that's well, they were indentured servants, but they were talking about the Irish. That wasn't real slavery. I said, okay, so you were forced. It was not voluntary indentured servitude. They made sure that you went in debt. As soon as you went in debt, they sold you into slavery. They where you had to work off your debt, and only then. And by the way, they tried. Many of them would try working you to death, and when you were done, that's when you were released. And only I'm like, wait a minute, it's
Oh,
still
and
slavery. It doesn't matter
by
how
the
you cut it.
way, if you didn't work off the debt, it was a oh, I have to look into it. I might torture a shadow with it. But if you
Which
didn't
one?
work off the debt, there's a good chance your kids would be sold off or whatever to pay off the debt. I mean,
The problem that I have with it is slavery is slavery. My view on slavery is okay. Would you define as slavery if someone can buy and sell you as a human being, and they can, well, that's different. Oh, and by the way, like you said, is if an indentured servant had kids, those kids were still put in indentured servitude too. and in certain cases they could be sold off, and you're like, wait a minute. And it's people want to just look at one aspect and say, okay, why don't you go look at the North Korea, which has literal slavery to this day? Go look at the Soviet gulags, which was slavery. There's no other way to put it. Go look at.
Hold on. North Korea still practice slavery?
Yes.
I did not know that. I thought North Korea. Granted, to be fair, North Korea is a country I absolutely have no interest ever in visiting. I might wave by it as I'm like flying over it, but or around it.
Well, apparently, if you want to watch the stars, that's one of the best places to go because there's no light. There's no evening lights.
Yeah.
No, but
there's like 6 different haircuts guys can get. I kind of know some of the.
What's her name? I can't remember what her name is. She escaped across the border. She's, she was Korean. She was she became a sex slave after escaping over, and then she got finally released with her family. But they went over to China for that. It's people forget the gulags are literal slave shops. That's what they do. It's not, hey, this is just punishment. You're expected to work and produce something for everyone outside. That's I mean, when you read the Gulag Archipelago, you read it. It was slaves until they worked you to death. And, it's like, just like the founding fathers, most of them were in debt. They were in debt, which meant they couldn't release their slaves. And Thomas Jefferson kept on trying to go up, by my understanding, kept on trying to get it so slavery was going to be illegal in Virginia, and he kept getting voted down. But now they're like, oh, well, he owned slaves. It's not as easy. The problem with most things is you want to look at black and white. Do I believe in slavery? No, absolutely not. But you also have to look at the times and the circumstances, and you can't say, well, this person had this or this. Okay, yes, but were they ahead of their time into what we would view as the actual rights of people? And the answer is yes. Thomas Jefferson was, hell, unfortunately, he's ahead of this time nowadays where he believes in free speech. Apparently, our government does not.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. If you have 80 FBI agents monitoring what people are saying on Twitter and then trying to get them banned if they say things that they don't agree with, that's not a good policy. And you think it just happens under Twitter is wrong.
There's banning Twitter. Oh my God, banning Twitter.
You mean TikTok?
TikTok.
So I was, you were right about it. I was listening to Robert Barnes. They're using that as an excuse to crack down on all social media. And that's the problem that I have with all of this is it's not, if this was the case and say, hey, look, because they're doing this in China, it can't be owned by Chinese investors. That would be a different aspect. But no, that's not what it comes down to. The more that you read the law, the more horrible it becomes.
It's fucking scary as hell.
And what gets me about it is that they're like, I always love it. To protect against fascism, we have to prevent you from being able to speak, and then we have to control your monetary to determine what you can buy, and then we have to determine what you can consume. All right, that's called fascism. No. This is to protect democracy. Unless you vote for the person we don't agree with. That's not a democracy. This is like old Soviet Russia where they used to have like one name on the ballot, and it would be like it's a democracy because everyone voted for him. Yes, what happens if you didn't vote for him?
You were sent somewhere not nice.
I know.
What was the other thing I was starting reading? I'm not as, I will definitely tip my hat to you. You're definitely more informed on some of this than I am. But if something catches my ear and it just doesn't sound right, I'm a dog with a bone. I will look into it until I understand what the hell's going on.
And that's what people should do. And to be fair, I think this is part of it. In my 20s, I just didn't listen to a lot of this stuff. In my 30s, I noticed once I had a kid and I started actually, becoming stable, then I started listening to more and more stuff. And then you're like, oh, crap. And, you're thinking, what kind of future am I leaving towards my children? And you start looking at this and then they're just like, oh,
we're screwed.
Well, I feel sad for. This is what I tell my son. I said they always need a plumber. They always need an electrician. We do
That
not.
that is very true.
You know
Um,
the other part that comes into it is at this point, um, this is what I'm worried about is we have some of the most freedom in the United States, especially compared to Europe. Um, where they're going after people for criticizing the government on immigration. Like, what are you doing? How can you have a robust debate about this? And I lost all respect for Neil deGrasse Tyson when I don't know. I've been watching a couple of videos where they're talking about with the COVID, and they said, "Well, look, people that were found out to be right months later are not still at the table discussing on how we should be reacting towards this." And I said, "Yeah, I know. It's
I think he's absolutely brilliant in his field of science. Absolutely brilliant. One of
I
the
used
smartest
to
men alive in his field.
I used to have more respect for him, but when you throw away the scientific method, how can I trust you as a scientist? That's the problem that I have with it is
Yeah, but we have
um,
politicians that are throwing away the Constitution and are making laws.
okay. And do you think I trust them?
No,
Okay.
it's
This is the problem that I have with it. This is what I'm saying is if you're a scientist, you should follow the scientific method. If you're a politician, no one should trust you anyway. So
that's more than fair. I think, like I said, I think he's absolutely brilliant in his field of studies. Study. I
I think he's
yeah.
a well-learned man. I think the problem that and I have this is I think a lot of astrophysics is bullshit, and a lot of it is because you can't test it. Um, uh, uh, there's a because a lot of it's supposed to be observational, and we're so far away, we're just guessing at what it is. Like it reminds me of string theory, which they finally said, well, it just hasn't worked out.
When I was younger and somebody explained to me what the multiverse was outside of the
Yes,
comic books
sure.
theory, the real I can't even say it's real science because we don't know. But at the
No.
same time, if somebody back in the 50s said cloning, he would have been laughed out of the room.
Well, but they talked about cloning for decades and decades. They finally got it through. I mean, I remember them talking about stuff like that. But I part of me goes through. How do I want to say this? I love the intellectual aspect to it. I really do. And they could be right. They could be wrong in astrophysics. The problem that I have with it really comes down to, um, as one person put it, is well, we don't believe in God, but we believe in dark matter, which is this invisible force around the universe that controls and how all things are operated and blah blah blah. And I
We
went,
don't believe
how
in
does this differ
God.
from God? You know,
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm working that thought train out. I mean,
well, here's what it really comes down to, and I had fun with one of my physics, is the speed of light is slowing down, and he freaked out because if the speed of light was slowing down, it screws up a lot of their equations.
if the
So,
speed of light's slowing down, that means time would. No, time is something else. Never mind. Continue.
well, they and we've had experiments that are showing that the speed of light tends to slow down, but but this is where it comes down to is they don't want to talk about that, but they'll admit that like the Big Bang exploded and speed of light moved really fast, and then for some reason it slowed down. It's been completely constant from now on. What? There's a lot of weird things that get into it, and that's why I said is they're guessing on what it could be,
Well,
and
again, Hawkins spent half of his career proving that Einstein was wrong. Uh, um, I,
well,
it's all guess. I mean, I don't want to say it's all guesswork, but it just feels like a good chunk of it's guesswork until it's not.
well, that's the all you can do is, and this is what people have to look at. Well, it's a theory. Well, it's an idea. It's not really a theory. It's the until you can start having ways of verifying and proving it. The problem that
Right.
I have with the speed of light is the speed of light is determined by basically, I forgot. I think it's the seconds. Anyway, they keep changing the units for certain things. So what they basically set the second how long a certain wavelength of light travels. Um, I think that's what it comes down to. It's something like that. I'm sorry, that's what they did with the meter. The meter's on a certain one, but what they did is they basically said a second is on how fast the speed of light travels, rather than saying, okay, this is a second, and we'll see how fast the speed of light. And apparently, they were showing that the speed of light was slowly slowing down, which has the same effect in certain ways as an ever expanding universe. When you do like the Doppler shifts. But boy, they do not want to get into that because then it screws up a lot of their equations. Being an engineer, a lot of times we're like, it's close enough to constant, so I'm not worried about it. But it, well, how do I want to put this? If you're fighting off on like the 6 decimal place,
yeah,
guess what? It doesn't affect you or anything that you're doing on a daily basis, not until you start getting into hundreds of thousands or millions or billions of years. And only at that point, and that's where the astrophysicists come in, because that's the kind of realm that they're dealing with, not the rest of the world that's actually practical. Like, well, they'll give you
okay.
well, I mean, if you're in the 6 decimal place, okay, what are you talking about? You're talking about 1 foot, maybe over 10,000 years. That might be the difference. Over, for over 10,000 light years, you might.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm getting it.
Yeah, well, I'm saying, but you're looking at such a small amount that the error of your machines may be the issue rather than anything else. However, when you expand this out to billions of years, it screws up all their equations.
Right.
So I don't want to. I don't want to. And this has happened before. I don't want science being dictated by a discipline that doesn't want to have to change their equations because it screws everything up. It's the same thing that happens with archaeologists. Archaeologists do not want to talk about if there was an advanced civilization, advanced being, let's say, at the Greek level, during 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
They don't want to talk about if there was an advanced civilization before the Holocene.
Okay.
So this is why there's such a big pushback against, even though there's a lot of evidence about meteors hitting the Earth at the end of the Pleistocene, which wiped out the mammoths.
Okay.
This is why I find this is where it gets into the D&D, and this is what like we all love. There was an advanced civilization thousands of years ago, and we're inheritors, and we only see their works, but we don't know all the mysteries that they used to know. Okay, I mean that's a common trope. Doesn't matter what you have. This is
Right.
sci-fi.
You got the Egyptians with the pyramid that can't quite figure out how they did it.
Well, it gets better than that because I was listening to some people that do it. Honor, what is his name? His name's Ben. I'll have to go look it up. I can't remember what his thing. Anyway, he was showing where there's saw marks in the into the stones. I mean, you can actually see like where they overcut the stone just a little bit. That's an actual saw. The radius of the saw shows it about to be 30 feet. Yet we have found no evidence of saws with the Egyptians. And what I mean is big circular saws.
Right.
Even though you can see, you can do it by the radius and you can find out how big it is and do the arc. Even though you can look at the stone and you can see where it has a slight curve to it, that would indicate that it's on a 30-foot, a saw blade that's 30 feet across.
But there's no. Okay, so they cut the what is it made out of? Limestone, sandstone?
Well, it's basalt and granite, which are very, very hard rocks.
All right, so they came up with a saw. I'm just going to go down this train of thought. They came up with a saw that was able to cut through granite, which granite is not one is heavy as hell, tough as hell. It is a prime building I get that.
Yeah.
But we're still talking about the copper bronze era. They didn't find iron. No, they got iron at that juncture. They had iron.
Well, the iron that they found is generally meteoric iron.
Okay. Yeah. So space metal.
Well, and that's only for, we're talking like dagger size. We're not talking about huge amounts of it.
Right. So, well, dagger. I mean, a saw doesn't have to be all that big. It can be really thin. It just needs to be.
What I'm saying though is, this is where I sometimes like reading this is where I kind of my conspiratorial archaeology is.
Yeah.
There's a book by Christopher Dunn called The Lost Technologies of Egypt. Now, he doesn't tell you how they did it. He only gives you, he's a machinist. So he's a machinist engineer. And he says, look, and it's a very, very dry book. I gave it to my friend who's an archaeologist. And he's like, my eyes are glazing over. I said, he's trying to prove his point, but to verify it. But he's showing that the difference between the ears or the face, and we're talking, something that's 6 feet wide, that they're supposed to have chiseled out with copper, are within 0.02 of an inch of precision from one side to the other. And I said, how do you do that by hand with copper tools on basalt?
Odd question, but could they have done that with God, what is it called? Obsidian. Obsidian is known to have be able to hold one of the sharpest edges known to mankind. It's like 0.1.
It's sharper than a scalpel. It's sharper than a scalpel.
I mean, I've seen in the culinary arts field, I've seen some people. I've seen a set of them.
Oh wow! Yeah,
and they're expensive as hell.
Sure, yeah.
And I mean, that's something they could have randomly. I don't know.
Well, but here's the point: is we're talking, we're talking about their huge statues, and yet they have precision that I can't get my contractors nowadays to meet, for some reason. Which is why I always laugh at certain parts. But his real point is that they're doing it with a precision and accuracy that is unusual for people doing it by hand, let alone people using very soft tools to chisel this out.
Yeah, that is.
And then his other point was, and this is where he was talking about the saws for Christopher Dunn. Uncharted X is, but I met Ben actually when I went on my trip to the Scablands. But it's Uncharted X, and he was discussing some of it. But you can look at it, and like I said, is you get this big piece, like let's say it's my wall, okay, and there's just enough of a curve, there's just slightly big enough of a curve that you could tell the saw had to be 30 feet across. But we have found no evidence that the Egyptians had such a saw. And so now you're going, where did this come from?
That just makes my head hurt.
Well, again, the real question is, did the Egyptians have this? Because if the Egyptians did not, then who did? And if the Egyptians didn't have this technology, that means it predates the Egyptians, right?
Yeah.
So if it predates the Egyptians, who were these people that did it? And where did they go?
I mean, I hate that answer, but oh my God, I really hate that answer.
Well, I mean, it's the question, because we don't know. Anyway, the real point is, and not that everyone has, like I said, is my friends who are archaeologists both hate Graham Hancock. And
I said, he has a Netflix show.
Right. Well, and we were discussing it, and I said, look, Graham Hancock, and I would show it as a table. We have a table. I said, okay, and I'll start it like one of the table. I said, Graham Hancock has to write about here, and I show where the table stops. I said, the problem is that he goes another 10 feet past the table. I'm like, look, you lost me here. Okay. And, but that's the discussion of whether it's Göbekli Tepe or some of these others, the Man of Ur, they act like Göbekli Tepe is just one small area. It's that they've been finding technology that I view as Greek. Okay, at Greek level, so we're talking
Right.
8,000 years later. They're having this technology that's 8,000 years of the equivalent of what the Greeks were producing, even though if you go by the normal things, these are supposed to be hunter gatherers that are not doing settlements, that are not doing this massive aspect of carving, and yet we know that there are um, statues that are that equivalent that are around 12 to 14,000 years old.
Jeez.
And then we have a gap. We have a gap of about 5 to 6,000 years before we start seeing similar statues again.
Okay.
I'm saying like.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, if you're like, for example, is I don't know how you did, but when I grew up, they said, well, one of the first civilizations was the Sumerians. The Sumerians were like 3,500 BC. Okay, but we're now finding statues that are the equivalent or better than the Sumerians 6 to 7,000 years before the Sumerians came about.
Didn't they just find a tooth not that long ago? A tooth that dates back further back than what they originally thought, and it's humanoid. I mean,
It's Well, apparently, okay, so a little side note for this. Apparently, human beings, well, I saw where they were doing cooking, and they think that cooking may go back like 800,000 years. Um, where we cooked meat.
yeah. Well, as soon as Oog realized that, hey, if I put a stick to this and I put over fire, it smells better.
Yeah, but this predates the Neanderthals. This predates the Homo sapiens. And so now you're like, well, just how far back did some of this go? That's what I'm saying. I don't have answers. I'm just there's really
Jesus.
compelling evidence that there was something that our technology or human beings were more advanced than we give them credit for. Again, I'm not saying how advanced they were. They were more advanced 10,000 years ago than we give them credit for. And it appears that they may have been creating things long before our archaeologists say that they did. And that's one of the things that's really cool if you want to go through, and people can talk about Atlantis and all this stuff, but if you go back and say, hey, look, this is here, well, how much, this is true, sea level rose about 400 feet from the Pleistocene to the Holocene.
Right.
Till today. So whenever I hear climate change is the worst thing ever, I'm like, no, the worst climate change occurred at that Holocene Pleistocene boundary. And the question is, why did the ocean suddenly rise up like 100 feet within a couple of years?
Well, God, I don't know how accurate it is, so don't hold this against me.
Sure.
But I'm repeating something I heard once.
Okay.
Was when Homer was writing about Atlantis, the age that he put on was roughly the same time thought processing that the flood. All the nations, old nations out there have the flood story, being
Right.
Moses or whoever. So an asteroid comes hurling into Earth, causes some kind of meltage, I guess
Okay.
meltage,
Sure.
and here comes a flood that takes out Noah and his people, Atlantis. So yeah, I don't know how accurate it was. I don't have a time machine. I can't go back there and tell you.
So, and this is what they all agree with this. This is why I took my son up to Washington about 12,000 years ago. I mean, they have it, I think it's 12,800 and 11,600 years ago. So about 12,800 years ago, there was a massive flood that went through Washington state. And it was one of those they call the Missoula floods.
Right.
The flood was up to 2,000 feet deep. Now and this is where they start arguing about it. So, and again, I'm going to go with Randall Carlson because I've listened to him. It's compelling. I think that he has good evidence for it. I've physically seen some of the stuff. Some things he was hiding from us. He's like, You're not supposed to see that anyway. It's because he doesn't have enough data on it yet. But I'd love to have for what. But it appears that there's a crater called Hiawatha in Greenland that dates anywhere, and they can narrow it down, but apparently they don't want to touch it. This is where it gets. This is where politics comes into our archaeology. I don't mean necessarily other stuff, but they're afraid to say that the crater can be anywhere from 12,000 to 80,000 years old. Well, if it's 12,000 years ago, guess where that puts it? Right at the end of the Pleistocene, the Holocene, or the end of the Pleistocene, the beginning of the Holocene, the same time that you had the Missoula floods.
Right.
So, and this is the same time that they said that I think sea level went up by 100 feet within a couple of years. It may actually be within a few weeks.
If sea level goes up by that much by a couple weeks, that's massive damage on a global scale.
Well, and his hypothesis, and there's a lot of evidence coming in there, but it looks like it may have been a comet or cometary fragments where it hit a bunch of meteors, hit the ice sheets in Canada, Greenland, part of the Europe, and it may have actually gone as far as Syria. So, if you have a string of if you have a string of meteors from the tail of a comet, and the Earth goes through it, we have the Pleiades stuff, or the whenever we have the meteor showers.
Yeah.
If it goes through it, imagine if there's a bunch of rocks, and we say, quote, small rocks. So let's just assume that they're 100 feet across. So we're talking Tunguska events. Now, if you have a string of them that all hit the ice sheets, what do you think that does to the ice sheet?
It melts it.
It melts it or vaporizes
evaporates it. If it evaporates it, then you got cooling. They can cause storms on massive.
And what happens when it goes up in the air? It has to come down at some point.
Right.
And so now you can understand why you're getting 40 days of rain.
40 days and 40 nights of rain.
Anyway, it's a compelling story, it's
definitely interesting.
But and so let's be honest about this, whether we like it or not. If such an event happened nowadays, our civilization would be thrown into complete chaos. And they're talking about human beings in the Americas disappeared apparently for 500 years. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't small groups, but there's like this gap of about 500 years where they don't find any human remains. And so if that happened nowadays, let's assume it hits the it hits Canada, it hits Russia, and some of these, it hits that northern hemisphere, and that would take out a lot of our technology. We would definitely be thrown way back. The economies would collapse. God forbid that it hits the ice sheets, and the ice sheets instantly start melting. So all of a sudden we start getting hundreds of, even dozens of feet. That would put almost all of our coastal cities underwater.
I mean, not complete water world, but we're the lost city of Atlantis is no longer Atlantis. It's the lost city of Disney World.
Or the lost city of Atlanta if you went to Futurama.
My ex-wife's mother-in-law lives in Hollywood, Florida.
Okay, yeah.
And me and my ex-wife have both playfully joked that we're not going to sell that property because here with the next 20, 40 years, it's going to become beachfront property.
So, and this was the other part that he was talking about. And again, he has a big, giant podcast, and I need to catch up. I'm about 20 episodes behind. That's about 40 hours of listening. And I got to episode 75 plus. So the first 10 episodes is him talking about, but part of what he was saying is that when you melt all of the ice over Canada, guess what happens to the ground? it starts rebounding upwards. And actually, you're not quite in Chicago, but even Chicago is starting to rebound from the. It's slowly rebounding because of the glaciers that melted.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You know what? That's cool. I I mean, I liked the Robotech stuff. I did. I just don't know the timing. But no, some of the stuff I love the ideas. The Palladium system just isn't quite my thing. that's
I
that's
was,
what's
I was going to say it's not that I don't have an interest in it. I just haven't had a chance to play it. To be
um
realistic. Uh,
well, it's Robotech. I liked Robotech better than Riffs. Part of it's because everyone was playing humans basically in Robotech, whereas in Riffs, it's not that any sense of balance is just thrown out the window. That's the problem that I have with Palladium Riffs. But they but guess what happens when you rebound that one part? What happens at the edge of the ice sheet, or the edge of the glacial? Sorry, of the we have plate tectonics. What happens at the edges of the plates? If the middle goes up, what happens to the sides?
okay, it buckles.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, if I'm pressing the middle,
Right,
the ends tend to go up.
right.
But if I release it, the middle goes up, but the sides go down. Guess where the edge of the plate is for that? Is right about where the Azores are, where there are three plates that all come in there.
Gotcha.
So if the plate at the edge goes down, where did Plato say Atlantis was?
Between the Hercules Gate.
It's about 3 days sail west of the pillars of uh, Hercules, which is
Yeah.
Gibraltar. Gibraltar.
Right.
What's about 3 days west of that? The Azore Islands. So there, I'm not saying it is, but now all of a sudden you get this rise of 400 feet of that, plus now you get a sinking for that aspect. And so that's where they, if that is true, they've also talked about the Rickshaw or whatever it is. There's this really cool place that in Africa where they say that could be Atlantis too. Regardless of what it is, it's a compelling.
Oh, the Sierra Eye. Yeah, I've heard that.
Where it kind of matches Plato's description, but it's in the middle of the desert. But it looks like a bunch of water had flowed across. Now, I don't know how long this is. The problem is it's a remote area. If we were billionaires, maybe we could go out there and, oh, let's go cool this. But there's like nothing within 200 miles of, or 300 plus miles of it. And then you have to get everyone, you have to bring in food. Yeah. Anyway, it's just cool to look. But the real point again is, when we talk about lost technologies is, okay, we know that someone over by the pyramids built these things.
Right.
They're using technologies that we have not found during that era. The technology that apparently they were using would appear to be more modern. And by more modern, I mean thousands of years. And then the other interesting part is they say that the work, as the dynasties got further and further, the quality and craftsmanship went down, not up, not linearly up like you would think that it normally did, but instead it was going down. So, yes.
Hold on.
Oh, now who is this?
Mark Hark.
No. I know it's Mark Hockman. I meant the.
Hold on, I jumped up.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I agree. Mark Hockman, my friend was I don't doubt it. My friend talked about them having aqueducts in Crete 8,500 years ago. Which, by the way, that still predates the Sumerians by at least 3,000 years. Now, I've heard the Santorini, but what they've been doing is that's not where they were saying that Atlantis was. And they're saying that they don't think that's actually where Atlantis is. It was the I was anyway. Regardless, I like the ideas of it because when we're talking about role playing games,
Yeah.
that's what I'm really coming down to is the idea of an ancient civilization being out there.
Oh yeah.
And this is why I said about astrophysics is if you get too wed to an idea and you base everything on it and something disproves it, it means that all your life's work has fallen apart and all of us and so there's this huge pushback. Well, that's not what science says. Science doesn't say anything. Science is a method, not anything else. That's what I get mad at is that the scientific method is you question and test everything. Just like the people that talk about, the science is settled on or whatever. But yeah, well, I don't doubt it. But the but it's not like we're lacking rock.
What was the other really cool thing I heard? Once again, I don't know if I exactly put much stock in it,
Sure.
but was it Noah was the last Samoa king or whatever, however you say that fucking civilization. And I was looking into a little bit more, but yeah, it was saying his real name was something, and he was based from that culture. And yeah, I'll once again I have to look into it more.
But the story of the Great Flood goes all over, and then let's assume that Noah wasn't part of the Pleistocene one. Let's assume that he was part of the Burckle crater. And boy, they don't want to talk about the Burckle crater either. The Burckle crater apparently hit the in the Indian Ocean about 6,000 years ago, and it created. Now we have a crater that's about, I guess it's 15 kilometers wide.
Right.
Now you tell me on something that's 2 miles deep and 15 miles wide, or 15 kilometers wide. Where do you think that water went to?
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's like jumping. I mean, from a much smaller point of view, it is being a big old guy like me jumping into a pool doing a cannonball. The displacement of the water's gotta go somewhere. Hopefully 80% of it stays in the pool. Most likely, but no, I get what you're.
Well, we know this happens. So even if we're saying some of these civilizations, and what is it, 6,000 years ago predates, I believe, the Egyptians as well. Yeah, I don't doubt that. But it washed everything up and away. Well, Mar Hockman, there was a literal mountain of silver in South America. The guess who mined that out? That was the Spaniards. Yeah. Well, it didn't just go up several feet. It went up 400 feet from the Pleistocene to the Holocene. The Ice Age until modern day. So whenever I hear people talk about it's the worst climate change ever, I went, no. Even if we melted all the ice right now, it'd only go up 127 feet, not 400 feet.
It would displace some people. No,
I'm not saying it doesn't impact, but let's not pretend that human beings haven't faced much worse in the past. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever said this online, but when it comes to human species in the earth, I always kind of figure it's like fleas on the back of a dog. Eventually, it will get tired of us and find a way to shake us off.
Well, it's like everything else. It doesn't care whether we're here or not. No. The Bronze Age collapse. This is the different part. Bo Paints means the Bronze Age collapse was about 2,500 years after the Burckle crater, and they think that was caused by another meteor strike. Well, and that's what part of it comes down to is if we had, quote, an advanced civilization, which I think that we did, an advanced civilization, again, I'm going to say it's going to be at the Greek level. If we have advanced civilizations, where are most of your cities found? On the coast, right?
Right.
And also, if that happens and suddenly the sea level rises by 400 feet, guess what happens is we lose all of that technology, and it's very hard to get someone to dive down 400 feet to do archaeological excavations.
Well, there's a temple.
Yep.
There's a temple that's in the bottom of the ocean off one of the sides of Japan. I don't remember what side
Uh,
it is, to be completely honest. Where it looks like it was a decent sized kingdom that one day that cliff said no more and plunk.
well, it either
And
went plunk or the sea level rose high enough to cover it. Yep.
right.
Um, and but there's a lot of these things that come in. And this is why I said this is one of the things I love about role playing games is I don't have to answer the questions or to have to deal with archaeologists. I can just plunk it in and we can just, there's an ancient civilization and this occurred. And this is one of the reasons that I love the paleo history. And I can make it into, actually, I bought a couple of RPGs for it, but this is where I can talk about, Conan, and they talked about the sinking of Atlantis or paleo mythic and the continent of Mu, which as a kid I actually read about. And then the other part is that I love the Pleistocene animals. Wouldn't it be so cool just to have your, we have the mammoths that come in, and you
Oh my
have it in
god.
there.
Mammoths. What was I reading? What was I reading? You'd appreciate that. Oh, they clone a mammoth. That's
Yes.
meat. And there's these things called the mammoth meatballs.
Oh, okay.
But they're afraid to eat them because they think that the meat might not be edible by human stand.
Yes.
And I'm like, what a waste of a good meatball.
Um, well, well, a lot of them were the same people. That's why I always have to laugh whenever I start hearing people talk about, oh, they look like this. Depends on where you're going for, but being in the Middle East, it, it's a lot more diverse than people think it is, and you'll find people that are very light in a lot of the Middle East. In fact, you can even see that whenever, if any of you ever watch, what was it called, Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah.
We can talk about some of that, and the Greeks prized women that had blonde hair, so it's not, and that whole and if anyone's
Oh,
watched the Lebanese,
the famous painting of Aphrodite,
yeah,
she had blonde hair.
well,
She
that's
came
that's
up.
Well, that's what the Greeks wanted, but but that went all through the Lebanon and stuff like that. Well, the my friends, I always have to tease them about it, but Schliemann, who they believe found Troy in the 1890s.
Yeah, you said something about that before.
I have to laugh at it because no one believed him, and his method of archaeology was using dynamite.
That's enough.
Anyway, he's credited with that. But I said, yeah, there's again, whether it's absolutely true or not, the point is that I think sometimes archaeologists say things that we have a lot less evidence for than what they want to admit, and they're afraid to say it. And then the same thing that applies to astrophysicists is, but
Yeah.
you'll make me rewrite my whole textbook. Like, well, if your textbook's wrong, it should be rewritten. Well, and whenever you see a scientist attack someone on a personal level, it's not science. You always
Right.
attack the idea, not the person. If you're attacking the person, you're failing. And whether you like Graham Hancock or not, the Society of American Archaeology, I guess it was in 2019.
They
Well,
really went,
what's that?
they really went after him.
They went after him, and it was unprofessional the way they went after him. They didn't attack the ideas; they went after him They went after him personally. And I
Uh,
don't get me wrong; he's a personable guy, but again, even if what he says is 5% correct, that 5% changes so much of what we know about our past that it's worth investigating. And
People from around the Western Mediterranean move. So, I'm sorry, the chat's blowing
yeah.
up. This
Oh,
normally doesn't happen. We
oh,
must be
oh my
talking about
God! You know what? That's fantastic. You got Mark Hockman. You got Bo. Of course, I know Bo's working tonight.
yeah, cannibal. Yeah,
It,
yeah.
it's, but what's left? No, it's well, like I said, Mar Hockman, they have evidence that Crete has aqueducts going back at least 8,500 years ago. And the Arabs, well, it depends on where you were, because a lot of the Arabs married sub-Saharan Africans during the slave trade. They didn't marry; they bred with them. Yeah, exactly.
If the textbooks are wrong, burn it to heresy.
Well, oh, we're speaking across each other. I just meant we're looking at different time frames. We're looking at 12,000 years ago. 12,800, 11,600 years ago. So that's the end of the Pleistocene era. And then we're like, so Younger Dryas era. Then you're looking at the Burckle crater, which was about 6,000 years ago. And then you get the Bronze Age collapse, which was about 3,500 years ago. 35, 36, 3,700, somewhere around there. And a lot of these, so the question is, okay, when did this occur and how far back? Because you can't date stone. And years ago, if anyone's ever listened to Robert Schoch said, hey, this looks like this is what the Sphinx is. The Sphinx looks like it's 8,000 or 9,000 years old based on the weathering patterns.
I was about to say, you can't exactly age it, but you could tell where watermarks are. That's not right.
But the erosion marks on it, he said, hey, this erosion looks like it would have been about 8,000 or 9,000 years ago. And that's what I'm just saying. It's a lot of these things are, but if we start pushing things back, then we have to rewrite things, because the dynastic Egyptians only go back to about, 2,500 BC. But now we're pushing things back to 8 to 10,000 BC. And then how old do we know and whenever it's stone, it's the same thing of, what's the precision? And again, like the giant saws, where did the giant saw go? We've not found any evidence of a giant, let me phrase it. We found cut marks that would indicate a saw that's 30 feet across, but we have not found anything that would indicate that we can say, yes, they actually had a saw 30 feet across. Like we haven't found pieces of it. So then the question really comes down to is, where did it go? Did they pick up and leave? Did it get moved to somewhere else? And then, and you can see where it's saw marks, and you can tell where it's the slight curve. And by the curve, you can tell on how big the saw was across, or, what the diameter of the saw was. So anyway, those are just the fun things I like to listen to.
They dropped it off to the poor bastards on Easter Island.
Well, that's a maybe. That's.
I don't know. I think.
There's a lot of weird questions about there, and that's one of the things I love, and that's why I like role-playing games, because we can do it. You can make whatever world you want. Whenever we talk about, there's.
Many people ponder as they collapse what happens. I think I might show that one before.
Well, the material scarcity, but Mar Hockman, they were looking at, if we're talking about the Bronze Age collapse, they're talking about they've started finding evidence of a meteor strike. And guess what a meteor strike might look like? Anyone read Sodom and Gomorrah?
Yeah. The gods are mad at us.
So,
we found the pit.
I don't know about the pit. I'm just saying that we, again, I like Christopher Dunn. The blade got recycled. Well, that's entirely possible. The blade did get recycled. But here's the problem that we have is that copper can't cut that well.
Not on granite. I mean, I could be wrong, but I can't imagine a soft metal such as copper being able to.
Well, if you want to have a little bit more fun, it looks like there may have been trade between copper, which they used to make bronze and stuff.
Right.
There seems to be this huge influx of bronze that came in, but they found these giant copper mines up, I guess, over by Michigan. Around Oak Island,
Oak Island, yeah.
and they found it, but they haven't found where all this copper went because it's in the Americas at least. Where did all the
Right.
copper go in the Americas? Well, what could have happened is the Americas is where they were mining it, and they were shipping it over to the Middle East. At which point, and this is what it comes down to, is it wasn't Eric the Red, or we didn't have Leif Erikson. We didn't have Leif Erikson that found in the Americas first, and we didn't have Christopher Columbus. And then it was made even, yeah, exactly, it was mostly copper. But what I'm saying is that it appears that huge amounts of copper suddenly came in. Where did this copper come from? And it may have come from the Americas. But that would have meant that they had to know about the Americas 4,000 plus years ago.
Which is a whole different.
Well, then if you really want to have a fun one, and they did something called Secrets of the Dead with Nova, there's a story of a bunch of Iberians that left the Roman Empire at a certain time, and they wondered where they went. And it appears that they went to South America during the time of Jesus.
Okay. All right.
I mean, that's the cool. I think it was on Secrets of the Dead. They were doing DNA testing and things on people, and it appears that they had the Iberian lineage. And what they had found is this group of people that blonde hair. Same thing that they found with this one group that they talked about with the Amazons that apparently were over near Mongolia, where they had blonde hair, but different groups of people. But it's really interesting on seeing where movements of people are coming through. And so when I went to talk to the archaeologist, I went through a cultural resources training for my job. They said that they think that the Americas were not populated by just one group. It was multiple groups that came over at different times. So some came from Europe, some came from Asia, so and it looks like some may have actually come from, well, the interesting thing is with Greenland was actually green during that time frame, during that time that he found it. And as we get the little ice age, yeah, exactly, with a decent ship could have done that. Well, in fact, the Inuit probably were going back and forth, to be fair.
There's
which is a different group of people, but they lived in a different part of Greenland.
Right. There's a story that this Irish monk made it. I can't think of his freaking name off the top of my head, but basically took a boat and basically sailed, right across and made it.
Easter Island. Well, that's that. Well, what I found interesting is they all blame them for cutting down the trees, but it appears that part of the reason that the trees, like Easter Island, used to be full of trees, and they think that the reason that it got deforested wasn't just because they cut them down. Apparently, they had brought rats on the ships as well, and the rats ate all the nuts. And so when the nuts were coming out, they couldn't regrow because they ate all the nuts. So that's what helped deforest. So not only were they cutting down trees to make ships and stuff, and to be fair, they also cut a lot down to farm, but now the trees could not regrow because the rats had eaten all of the fruit and nuts off of them. Sorry. These are just like cool little things that I like to pick up from like real life.
I did not know that. It makes sense with the rats, but
yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's one. They also think that the group ethnically is Oceanic, which is which is part of my family. Oceanic may have arrived 12,000 years ago, at least, maybe if not longer, to South America. So sometime pre-Pleistocene era, or Holocene. So during the Pleistocene era. Anyway, but for games, that's the real point I'm trying to do is we don't know as much about the world as we pretend to, and people claim that we do, and like no, it's not set nearly as well in stone. And my friends who are archaeologists said, do be very that they have to be very careful on who they deal with sometimes, because if they cross the wrong guy, that guy will attack them and try besmirching the reputation. Um, so yes, there's a
Yes.
lot of it's a lot of cool stuff out there. Anyway, to throw into your games, and I kind of like
Yeah.
to tell you, like, I mean, the books are the Christopher Dunn writes like an engineer. It reads like an engineer, and which means that your eyes will glaze over unless you absolutely love the subject.
I don't know. My eyes were about ready to glaze over when I was trying to read the Lord of the Rings. Not Lord of the Rings. Well, yeah, Lord of the Rings makes my eyes glaze over, and so does George R. Martin's Game of Thrones.
Well, now just imagine this is all. Just imagine the most boring teacher that you had trying to teach you physics,
Yeah.
and don't get me wrong, he provides good information, but even for myself, I'm going, okay, he's talking about the circles and everything else, and he's talking about the math that's all involved, and I just went, okay, here's what, I wish he just put a conclusion at the end for like 2 paragraphs to simplify it, and said the precision between this ear and this ear is so close that we don't think that it can be done by hand because it's within 200ths of an inch. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
that's
don't know.
that's
That's
insane. And we're talking about a head that's 6 feet across.
right.
So
Freaking
you visually wouldn't even be able to. He said that kind of precision is stuff that they do now on CNC machines.
damn.
That's the kind of precision. He said, okay, well, what are we looking at? And then his son did stuff where they did it with the with just their vases.
Yeah.
Those vases are carved. They are not. They're carved out of pure rock and granite.
No.
So they're granite, rhyolite, the various igneous rocks, and that's hard. And you almost have to melt it almost to do some of these things. And we're talking, they did a 3-dimensional spin,
Yeah.
and the surface is like within a 10th of a thousandth of an inch for how flat it is. It's like within thousandths of an inch. And so you're going, wait a minute, how do you get that by hand to make sure that's so perfect? And we're talking about stuff that we know is at least 4,000 years old.
I've seen some statues that came out of Italy where they're made of marble,
Yep.
and I it's almost like if you were a doctor, you could just walk up there and tap at one of the veins because how well it was
Yes.
chiseled out, sanded
Yep.
out. No.
Yeah, but here's the interesting thing. We have a name for this. It's the Incas, but why is the Incas 150 years when they're supposed to have started the civilization? Why is that architecture so superior to the ones that are 100 years later, where they did the repairs to it? I forgot what it's called. Anyway, it's one of these things that when you start looking at the precision is far better the older it is than the newer stuff before the Spaniards came in anyway.
Oh yeah, I went to the
Yeah,
Spanish
exactly.
too. They just build their shit on top of old ink. We're gonna build
Well,
a church right here on your holy building.
well, that was the
What?
whole point of it is, are we inheritors of older civilizations? Which of course we are, but the question is that these first civilizations what did they inherit it from? And if it's as old as it could be, what was there 10,000 years ago or 15,000 years ago?
Wow. Yeah.
I, I mean, once you start going down that rabbit hole, and this is the fun part. And again, I don't know how true it is, but Christopher Dunn believes that the pyramids and we have no evidence that they buried anyone during that time frame in the pyramids. They buried. So his point was is that the pyramids were not used to bury people; they were used for another purpose.
Batteries. Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard because of the material they're structured out that has the ability to uh, um, hold a charge to hold a
Yeah,
charge.
well, it's like a piezoelectric effect. Whenever we talk about
Right.
crystals, is when you compress them or you expand them, they create an electric charge. Well, what do you think would blow out something like that? Like if something, so if it's operating on the oscillation of the Earth, let's say that the moon's moving around, that moves stuff around there to get that charge. What
Right.
would cause that to basically explode or to damage it?
No idea off the top of my head. It's
Perhaps a meteor
a
when it hit
meteor
the
would do
Earth?
it. I mean, at the very top of at the very top of the pyramids were supposed to be a golden capstone,
I Yeah.
which is gold is can be used as a gold is. I don't know if it's true or not.
I'm going to ask since Bo paints me, hey Bo, sorry I have to interrupt you for
That's
that.
right.
Um, I've been looking at Cahors Cthulhu. It looks kind of cool, but it's set during the Roman era. So basically, you're going to be in the Roman times fighting against Cthulhu. I'm like, that sounds interesting.
Sounds like you're fucked.
Well, I don't know. That sounds like it's going to be fun. Actually, we know that they went back at least 18,000 years, and now it looks like they may have gone back 35,000 years. And there's a very controversial one saying 120,000, but the actual belief is that we're at least 33. With Bronze Age warriors, dude, we can do that with the Conan game right now. It's got bronze. We can do that whole thing, and it's got Hyborian cult and everything else we can do in there.
Boy, those poor bastards at the Christian Church of Science are going to be really disappointed by how far back we go.
Well, that's one of the reasons I like this conjecture. I don't know what's true or not. I just know what we're getting doesn't answer a lot of these questions, and so it's the kind of thing of like, I know you're wrong, but I don't know what's right.
Yeah.
You went blue for a bit.
Yeah.
I have to laugh at your that's what I think makes fun. That's one of the reasons I like these stories. And I talked to Dave Matheson. Let's see. Which he's a cool guy. He even signed the books for my son, but he likes to do the star myths.
Speaking of stars, we have a solar. We have an eclipse coming up this month.
Oh, okay. Lunar eclipse.
Yeah, I think I'm not 100% sure.
But anyway, I need to finish. I can get to about 100 pages in the books, but yeah, the problem that we're having nowadays for analyzing some of these skeletons and how far they go back and testing for the DNA is that many of the Native Americans don't want them to be done in the Americas, so we can't tell on who actually was here.
I can't say I blame them, but at the same time,
well, part of me goes, if it's 9 or 10,000 years ago, that's all of our history. It doesn't matter what race you are,
right?
That's and then which reminds me, I need to give that book back to my friend. The medicine wheel, the Wyoming big medicine wheel. Yep, in Cro-Magnons. Yeah, but and the Devonians or the Devonations. Anyway, the big medicine wheel looks like it goes back at least 5,000 and possibly 10,000 years ago, and it's tracking stars at a precision that we didn't get until probably the last couple of hundred years. Like it would track like you. Well, the problem is that they messed up some of it, but it actually would track all of the planets and tell you where they were going to be aligned. And we're going back 5, and no one knows on. And I talked to my friend who lives on a reservation. He says, "Oh, we have several of those." Talking about the Native Americans. Well, first peoples. He told me just call him an Indian. Anyway, he's like, you can't call me an Indian. I said, you told me to call you an Indian. He's like, yeah, you're right.
I ran into some. I have a friend who's a midget, and I called him a small person, trying to be somewhat,
a little person,
a little person, and he got mad. He's like, I'm da 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 da, and he's like, I wish you'd call me a dwarf. I'm like, I can't. He's like, why? I'm like, because you don't have a battle axe.
You better be careful. You just hand him a battle axe, and that'll be the end of it.
I beat my ass.
Well, we don't know if they are the same culture. All we do know is that we have peoples that go back that far, and it would be nice to DNA test to see, what happens if we found out that they were from a completely different group. Let's assume that they matched the Egyptians. What would that mean? That meant that somewhere at some point they traveled over there. That doesn't mean all people are related to them. It just means that one person is.
There's the bridge.
Yeah.
There's always, as long as I've been, looking into stuff, the bridge.
But it's not watertight. We're talking about piezoelectric, which is when you compress things. It's the same way that a lot of people's crystals work, for their watches, is that it creates an electric charge whenever you put a pressure on it, or the piezoelectric effect. But guess what happens when the Earth, compresses and moves, which is usually caused by the moon. That can generate electricity, and it's interesting. It's an interesting concept. I'm not saying he's 100% right, but it's just interesting. I'm here to serve. That's right. I'll have to go find it. I like Christopher Dunn because he's an engineer, and I looked at his stuff and I read his books. It's an interesting hypothesis. I hate calling things theories because it requires a lot of evidence for your theory. Well, my friend was talking about, so I'm about 30 miles away from the largest Clovis site in the United States.
Clovis site.
70% of all Clovis artifacts, even though it's Clovis, New Mexico, I live in Texas, 70% of all artifacts about the Clovis people come about 30 miles away from where I live. And I got to go visit that as part of my training.
Right.
And they talked about that they were finding, because the flint here is very good, they were finding the flint that was created here in this part of Texas was being traded thousands of miles away. So it went all over. Yep. Well, I'll say this much is I would just love to do not saying it's the best, anyone remember the Mastika stuff from D&D 2nd edition? Oh, yeah, I know that's before you, Connell, but
that's way before me, Haas.
Yeah. But the Mastika I really enjoyed with D&D. That's when D&D was not afraid of going off and focusing on different groups and defending them. And
it's not so much offending them. I was a conversation with my daughter. She's like, she doesn't understand why people get offended.
Yeah,
easily get offended these days. And I'm like, people just want to be offended. It feels like they want to be offended that you're not, catering to them. And you got companies out there that is too afraid to offend people. They're offending everybody else.
Yes. Well, the problem is that I hate saying it. There are too many people in the in academia that are looking for a reason to be offended so they can, teach, and they aren't teaching from a place of knowledge. They're teaching from a place of emotion. And, there's nothing worse than having someone, it's like my friend, and stop being offended for my friend, for whatever group he is. You can't call him an Indian. He told me to call him an Indian, you idiot. No, that's cool, but he's taking 16th century Europe. Well, 16th century Europe is really good for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Yeah. Well, they probably are sometimes, but we just don't know. And when we say, I'm talking pre-Pleistocene or the pre-Holocene, so we're talking 10,000 plus years ago.
Yeah, Hawkman, you can't please everyone. The
No.
moment you try, you're fucked properly.
Yeah, I think that's the problem that I have with too many of them. Let's see.
Well, it's like, it's kind of. I've never been a huge Star Wars fan whatsoever. I jokingly call it the movies that explain daddy issues.
Go ahead.
The Mandalorian TV show that's on Disney Plus, absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. And it's like, oh my God, how can you watch it? I'm like, easy. I found some aspect of Star Wars that doesn't piss me off. Leave me alone. Was it Picard, the Star Trek show? Once again, I had nothing against sci-fi, just not really ever been my bag. Absolutely love the show. How can you watch that? Yeah, but it's so woke. I'm like, Star Trek has always been slightly woke.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, shit.
well. Here's the thing that I get into it. It's not trying to knock it. Is you don't have any real ties for this because a lot of this came out, when you were fairly young. Like for me, whether you like Star Wars, like my mother said, she pegged. Oh yeah, Darth Vader is his father. She said was saying this in the very beginning of at the end of Star Wars, and Leia is his sister.
Oh yeah.
Well, she said, and my mother said, yes, because that's what they did with all of those. If you read a lot of literature, that's the classic story of, that's a lot of it. Well, the problem with Rey again would have been she would have been a better character if she had earned her powers and she had worked for them, just not given them. And that's the problem that I have with this newer generation.
She would have been a better character if she wasn't Luke Skywalker ripoff.
Well, I would not have minded if she was going to be trained, very similar to how Obi-Wan Kenobi trained Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm finding him. He's going to teach me how to do some stuff. That would have been cool. The problem is that they feel that they have to tear down these characters to build up a new character, rather than saying, "Hey, look, I'm handing this off." Let's anyone that's watched Kung Fu, the old David Carradine.
Yeah, I remember watching it somewhat.
Well, do you remember all of his teachers?
Somewhat. I mean, you got also remember that show was reruns by the time I started watching it.
Well, no, what I mean by that is, did they make his mentors idiots that didn't know anything, and he was so much better than they were?
No, they did not. They did not do that.
But he was still a kick-ass character. But you don't have to tear. That's the problem I have with the modern stuff, is they believe that they have to tear down the old one to build up a new one. Or another good example is whenever we watch Aliens and you watch Sigourney Weaver. Sigourney Weaver is surrounded by a bunch of badasses.
Right. But by her own nature, she is somewhat of a badass, but that's...
But that's my point. You don't have to tear the characters around to make her look better.
Right.
That's the problem that I'm having with this modern writers, is what I'm trying to say. Modern writers tend to tear down the old stuff to somehow make their new character look good, instead of saying this new character is an inheritor of the older ones. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I remember. Yeah, I think. Okay.
And that's all I'm trying to say. It's too many people seem to have actually forgotten the old literary aspects of how to tell a good story. You don't have to destroy your characters. You just have to make them you have to give them a niche. You have to make them good at what they can do, and then you surround them with other good people. And guess what? They all elevate each other. It's the same reason that I know Shadow doesn't like, but I like Conan the Barbarian, the original movie.
I like the Jason Momoa version
Well,
better,
no,
to be honest.
well, I that was probably more true to it. The problem I had is that they didn't give a good villain. The villain was kind of weak. Yeah,
I can't argue that one. That the villain in the movie was weak sauce, but Jason Momoa looks he physically looks the part.
I'm not saying he doesn't. It's just but what I'm trying to say is the music was anyway. The real point is that when you look at the people that surrounded him,
Yeah.
whether it's Valeria or Subutai, were they incompetent?
Yeah.
No, they were competent. That made Conan look competent.
Competent. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
you
I
don't.
get where you're going with.
Yeah,
There's just, I mean,
and not
there's
only
just
that
been
is
some shitty ass movies out.
I know. Well,
I
yeah.
mean, there's always shitty ass movies out, but
Oh, I don't know, Smar Hockman. I was 4 when Star Wars came out.
Star Wars shit. I I don't know. I just
Have
my
you watched
friend.
Have you watched the Family Guy version of Star Wars? There.
Oh yeah, my favorite scene is where Peter and oh the
Or-
fuck Brian were wondering if they could get that couch into the ship. That's a really nice couch.
No,
Oh
no.
god.
You know what one of my favorites is that um, it was when what is it when they killed
Don't
with
tell
Beirut
nobody.
and they killed off the John Williams orchestration. Oh my God, we're left with Danny Elfman. And he pulls out the sword and cuts off Danny Elfman's head. There's so many little areas in there that are just great.
Herbert the pervert. Herbert the
Oh
pervert was Obi-Wan. I
yes,
want to show you the Force. Now don't tell nobody. I'm like, oh my god. Or when was it not Peter but Chris goes to save Princess Leia? Aren't you kind of fat to be a stormtrooper? Well, you can stick it in right, stuck up bitch.
yeah. Yes.
I'm like, oh my god.
Well, come on, that was great. You
Uh,
had to.
you know, I've said this. I don't know if I said this on this on with you guys, but I know I've said this before. Good movie. You can know when you're watching a good movie because it's quotable.
Well,
Or that's not entirely true. There's some horrible movies that are very quotable too.
I'm going to say, quotables is one, but like I can't really quote Ben Hur, but it was a great movie.
Oh man, I want to watch Casablanca like 50 more times,
Oh yes.
so it just becomes quote. I can just quote it.
Well, that's true. Well, my favorite still is Rick. I know you despise me, and he says, "Well, if I ever give you a thought, I suppose I would."
I didn't know I didn't know I had brown eyes. Did you?
Yeah,
Uh,
Well, and that's the kind of character we all want to play if we ever get in those situations.
oh my god.
It's the um,
No, that was a great choice. I'm really glad that you picked that one.
well, I
I
figure I've been trying to pick films that I think that Jack should watch. So that's
I
been
love Jack to death, but jeez, he's
now. To be fair, the last movie he picked was really good.
no for Great Glory was amazing. I have
Yeah,
no bones about that. He's just way too serious for his age. He's
I was like him at his age too.
I was angry. I wasn't that serious. I was just very angry at that age, but
No, I was probably a lot more like Jack was at his age, more than my son is at 14. Um,
God.
but to be fair on this, that's good. Hopefully he'll mellow out a bit. Um, Well,
We
well,
hope.
well, how do I want to put this? Um, you can be one of these people that's, like this, it's all cut and dry and never go anywhere. And you're like, well, how does this person get ahead? He said, because he doesn't piss off everyone. He kind of like gets people to lead and follow. Like, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I agree with you. Um, yeah. I don't know that. It's been years for a lot of these things. I've watched lots of films. I still want to watch some of the old Ray Harryhausen films again.
I can't do Clash of the Titans. I think I maybe I'll watch again when Meg gets. I don't know. If I hook up with somebody who has kids, I might throw it in there. But at the same time, I think I'm just done with that movie.
No, I want to watch Sinbad, the Sinbad ones.
I don't think I've ever seen Sinbad
Well,
entirely.
yeah, neither have I. That's the whole point. Or if I have, it's been 40 years. Um, but the Sinbad ones and then a couple of others. Um,
Speaking of Star Wars, uh, our all right, okay. I've said this before. If I poke at one person, I need to poke at the other person
yep.
because I want to be fair when it comes to all things politics. But I was listening to something at Trump. It was originally asked, why did Trump want to meet Stormy Danielson, or whatever her name was,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
And he said, I wanted to meet her because she did such a great job on Star Wars.
Oh, okay.
Well, she did a version of Star Wars. It was called Space Nut.
Okay.
And when he was saying rip off of Star Wars, I just,
Well, let's not forget Thumb Wars,
oh my God.
where they use the thumbs for Star Wars, and then
Yeah.
and then apparently the Turks made an equivalent where it was like almost a literal rip off of it, where they decided to do it. Um,
I mean, oh my God. Some of the movies that came out freaking Bollywood. Where does, huh?
Bollywood's in India.
No, no.
What link are you looking for? I don't know, more Hartman. The only link I sent to was to Bo. Oh, Hardware Wars. Okay, Turkish Star Wars.
No, it doesn't. But they completely stole Spider-Man. They did a Spider-Man movie where Spider-Man was friends with Wonder Woman. I'm like, wait, hold on.
They used to do some crossovers like that. They used to do some DC Marvel crossovers every so often.
Oh yeah, it was just I caught. I'm like, wait, something.
Oh, speaking of Bollywood, if you want to watch like high action adventure with complete crazy D&D style, I mean, have you seen the ones where they like? I've only seen like little clips of it, but where the guy turns into like he gets a shield and they shoot him off a catapult and he flies into the next line and another guy carries a big giant mace and starts swinging it around.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've seen some of those.
I mean, that's Exalted. That's the style of Exalted. If you're gonna play a game, it's not realistic at all. It's meant to be fun. Um, okay.
I think he's trying to do a Lincoln.
Yeah, that's probably the. Okay. You know what, Mark Harkman? A lot of times, I think Connell has to give you permission to post links by making you a mod or something like that.
Well, if I ever figure out how to freaking do these things.
Yeah.
In those days, 70s, having crossovers was, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, back in the
Here's the
early
problem that
90s
I
where they
had
did,
was.
what?
I was just going to talk about crossover for. I was watching. I was reading the last bit of Warlord, and they did crossover with the rest of the DC universe. And I said, you know what? As soon as you did that, you tuned me out because I stopped caring. Sometimes I just want the worlds not to cross over, and I want my universe to be unique unto itself. Stop trying to bring all the crossovers from all the other. Anyway, that was just my feeling for some of it.
on the mid like somewhere in the 90s they did a
I don't know.
crossover with DC and Marvel, and they put Logan, Logan up against Lobo.
Okay.
And it was less than a page of a fight. You see Wolverine knocking Lobo over a bar, and all you see is Wolverine's hand going boom, doing this, and walking away with a cigar in his mouth. I'm like, no, 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 Lobo. I mean, Lobo's badass. He needs more than just a.
Wasn't Lobo equivalent almost to Superman?
Lobo was immortal. I mean, beyond immortal.
That's what I meant. Is I thought Lobo was a foe of Superman.
He wasn't. I mean,
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. I don't know if he was a foe or what, but well, he wasn't. He wasn't. He was like on the same scale as he. They worked together, but at the same time, they would. I don't know. It's they had a problematic relationship. Hey, Bruce.
Oh no.
Peter Hasselhoff is the main character. Ooh.
Was this before or after his
Drunk
music career?
hamburger.
His German music career.
Oh Jesus! I try to forget about that from time to time.
I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't care for superhero characters. I don't really care about. I never that I had 2099, and I think those were some of the ones I copied. But I'd much rather watch Akira. Akira was a very, if you get the manga for it, oh my god, that's a cool manga.
You and my friend, you talked to Jade last night over
Yeah.
about guns. He's a big he.
I
When I go to the
actually
comic book,
we were discussing Iron Kingdoms last night while you were up there. I was communicating via Discord with them.
yeah,
And really, my point with that whole thing that you guys were doing last night is everyone looks at a single technology, and it's usually one technology doesn't mean anything because you have to have a bunch of technologies all come together before you can actually move something forward.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, I had a brain thought a child earlier today. Imagine steampunk, Pathfinders. I don't know how to do it. Regular D&D. Bruce's.
we
It's
talked
already
about Turkish
mentioned.
Star Wars. We talked about Turkish Star Wars and Thumb
But
Wars.
okay, you know what? D&D and Pathfinder, they had these little lizards that produce electricity. They'd bite you and shock the shit out of you. You get a bunch of them together, it become deadly, right? You stick one of these things in the copper cage. You put it on your back, but you have some kind of insulation so it doesn't shock you. And you attach the copper cage to two bullwhips. So as you hitting the guy with the bullwhip, you're doing electricity damage as well, like shocking damage. I'm like, how steampunk is that with a fancy twist?
Oh no, I have a better one than that. Go get those guys with some shambling mounds
Oh God.
because um, when shambling mounds get hit by electricity, they get bigger.
Yeah. Oh Jesus.
I I enjoyed watching the cartoons in the 90s. The 90s was the heyday, I think, of cartoons.
Oh yeah, Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, Batman. Oh yeah.
The Tick,
Uh
Earthworm Jim,
him.
the Cat, Salmon Max. The
Sam and
actually,
Max. I somewhat remember that show. Weren't
and
they like detectives?
yep, and then let's not forget that we also had the we did have the X-Men cartoon around this.
Disney is supposedly bringing the that version of the X-Men back. I'm not holding my breath,
And
but
Gargoyles. Gargoyles was another good. Gargoyles was probably my favorite cartoon in the 90s.
Gargoyles deserves like its own something.
Well, yes. Is it Space Mutiny on the Bounty or?
Star Trek.
Yeah, I'll be honest. as a kid, I used to like Star Wars, but really after Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan, I'm just not interested anymore.
On. I watched that movie and absolutely had no reference. Like, who the hell is this fucker? Well, he was on
Well,
an episode once.
he was, yeah, but
Okay.
that was what made it so cool is they actually went back and referenced an episode from like 15 years before.
Oh, I mean, I get it. It just if you're just watching the movies and or not, not really ever watching the TV series, like who the hell is this fucker?
How did you
Uh,
evade that one? It was on like all the time. Well, yes, there was Ren and Stimpy, which my
I
favorite of
remember
the Ren
Ren
and
and
Stimpy
Stimpy.
was it's the Canadian Yak or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
Um, I don't even remember Cops
I
and Galaxy
remember.
of Adventure.
I like Cops. I remember Cops. I
No,
don't
what?
remember
No, what
Galaxy Man.
is that from cartoons?
Yeah, these are cartoons.
Okay, I don't remember Cops from cartoons.
I do. The movie Police Academy.
Uh-huh.
That had its own cartoon for a hot second.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
toys. Oh, speaking of merchandise, so I know that there's a bunch of people in chat, and I know yourself probably will not see Dungeons and Dragons until it either you'll watch it, but you might watch it at some point, but you're not going to see it in theater. Dot dot dot. Whatever.
Yes.
I've been to Target and I've been to Walmart. And you think being from a company that Hasbro owns D&D, who is one of the biggest toy companies out there, right?
Yep.
I haven't found one fucking toy from the D&D movie.
I thought that they had them, and maybe you have to special order them.
I don't know, because I was wanting to get my daughter the Fat Red Dragon.
Oh.
And I just can't fucking find that shit anywhere. I mean, I know, like, I've seen a bunch of fucking toys for Mario Brother. Oh my god, the Super Mario Brothers. But I don't know. It's just kind of weird.
Well, apparently they have they have the toys. I just don't know if they're not selling them. But anyway, okay.
I remember the Wheeled Warriors. God,
I don't, and I was a big person that watched a lot of these things.
I will see the new DD.
Well, let's look if they're going to bring it on to HBO Max or they're going to bring it on to, well, see, I think they're going to put on the Paramount Network. I'm like, I'm not going to see the Paramount Network.
So I have it because it has shows like Yellowstone on it and the spin-off of Yellowstone's, which I really fucking enjoy.
Well, everyone's like, you should watch this. I said, I barely watch anything. I watch you guys, and then I need to. I've been watching way too much, Ukraine coverage.
I haven't been watching any of it. Russia's eventually gonna do what they do, and Ukraine will be part of the Soviet Union again.
Well, they'll probably go to the Dnieper River and just stop there. That's probably where they're going to stop. But by that time we'll have de-dollarized. Yeah. Well, Bo, don't go see the D&D movie with Jeremy Irons in it. Just trust me. Just don't.
See, I just stepped off the high seas, John Wick.
Well, John Wick it looks fun, but again, my friend will probably buy it. He's got a 70-inch screen.
I saw it. John Wick.
My friend enjoyed it. I just I look at the movie theaters and like there's no real like if I go with my friend, we'll go see a movie. If but that's about it. I that's about it. Whenever I go see him, we'll usually go see a movie at the Alamo Drafthouse. So
you definitely talked about the I don't know. I love going to the theaters. I love if there was actually real, not real plays, but if there was a play that was actually played in a real theater, I'd go see it. I love going to the theater.
Sure. I don't knock it. I'm just As
I
I get
know it's not
older.
everybody's bag. It
Yeah.
was just something me and my grandpa did a lot as growing up, and I just continued doing it for one reason or the other.
Well, when I was a little, well, we're talking when I used to work at Dell. Um, I used to work a night shift. Well, guess when they would play the first run of the movie is at 9 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
And so, guess who would go to the first showing of the movies? And I go there, and they're like, "It's sold out." I'm like, "I've already seen it because no, I think I worked at 4 o'clock or something." So I would go see the movie before work, and they would get so pissed off at me. And then there was another time I was in Dallas, and they had a sneak preview that was like a day or two before, and so we went, and we were just trying to find a movie to go watch, and I think it was oh, what was it? Was it Skyfall? Anyway, it was it's the one where M dies
Yeah, I think that's Skyfall.
yeah. So, which I thought was pretty good. Anyway, we went
I
to go
liked it.
see it with my friend. We saw it, and we had dinner, and they're like, "Oh, okay, I'll see you later." She said she went to work, and I was like, "Oh, we're gonna go see Skyfall." She said, "I saw that last night." They're like, "How did you see it last night?" She's like, "I went to the theater. It just happened there's one theater that was playing on because and I found this out is Dallas, at least it used to be, Dallas was a good way of determining how well a movie would do in the rest of the country. So if it did well in Dallas, it would do well in the rest of the country.
So it somehow picked up Peoria status somehow.
Well, what they did is, well, the problem is that if you showed up in New York, it usually is just New York. Or if you just show in LA, it's just LA. But they want to
Right.
see how it does around the entire country. So they tried picking kind of middle America.
Yeah,
And
well,
Dallas was one, and probably Peoria and a few others.
that's where the saying "if it doesn't
Yeah.
play in Peoria, it won't play anywhere"
Yeah.
came from. But that might have very well been more of a music point of view than
Hmm.
I don't know.
Well,
Peoria, Illinois just seems to be the test bed for a lot of different shit. Because I'm like, hey, have you tried like a food or a soda?
yeah.
No, I've never even heard of that soda before. I'm like, oh yeah, it's dot dot dot. By the way, uh, Pepsi, peat flavored Pepsi is nasty. Just throwing that out there. That's just it's wrong. Don't do it. Save yourself.
What? My mother's like, "Ooh, Pete, they're horrible candy, mom." And she's like, "Ooh, candy corn." Like, candy corn's what you give to kids you don't like.
Oh man, no, Bruce, get out! No, no, no. I'm about ready to sign off here with the next few minutes because
That's
I hit the
cool.
2 hour mark and I'm dying. I'm not dying.
I
I'm just
know.
tired as hell.
Well,
But
you know how I am. Is I'm like, oh, I'll only spend an hour, and it's like, all right, guys, I gotta, you're the one that says I have
yeah,
to go.
PBR. Fuck that nonsense. Ugh.
No, Bruce should be drinking only Shiner Bock, and if he really
Uh,
wants to suffer, he should be drinking Lone Star.
oh, it's like I don't. I know there's a bunch of people pissed off at Bud Light right now, but I never considered Bud Light to be real beer, anyways.
No, no, but Bud Light is for college students that are trying to get drunk on the cheap. It's the kind of beer you give to people you don't like.
That's the truth of the matter. Connell's getting
Oh well,
demoted.
I'm gonna say this much
Yeah.
though. My ex, whenever I would have to go pick up my son or something, or I'd have to deal with her, I used to get her blueberry beer, and she went from being um, surly to being a nice person as soon as she got a blueberry beer in her. It's like best $8 I spent because I used to get a 6 pack.
Yeah, I mean, I have a trying relationship with my ex-wife. We try to keep it civil for the most part for because we still,
I
have a
know.
daughter.
Well, I have a civil relationship
Oh,
with.
I know. I've
Yeah.
heard you've talked about your ex-wife, and for the most part, but there's there's been times.
There's always times. That's one of these things that but no, my son was doing something. She was calling him lazy, and he said he was a slave boy. He says, "Well, if you're gonna be a slave boy, you can go live with your father." And I said, "You know what? If I wasn't traveling over the next month, he'd be more than welcome to be up here." Um, I'm all for him. Come on up, boy. I got more trees to plant.
Jesus.
I say that we have more holes to dig, and then I'll plant the rest of the trees in the fall.
My
My cherries are looking nice though, but
I
they're all in
lucked
pots.
out with I lucked out hardcore with my grandparents and traveling the way I did. I mean, I I regret not being able to do for my daughter what my grandparents did for me. Where, like I said, she has a itching for Italian food. We go spend a week in Italy or wherever. But traveling over in Europe, if you're already in Europe, traveling is a whole lot easier than trying to get over there to for more.
Well, that was like I said, I took my son to Hungary, um, and we spent 2 weeks there, and then the other thing I did was, but you're right. When I lived I also took him to Hawaii for 2 weeks, and at one point I was not at a volcano. I said, "Yes, you were." It's like, "No, I wasn't." I said, "I have a picture of you standing right below." He's like, I didn't know it was a volcano. He liked volcanoes about 6 months after I took him to Hawaii. Like, well, this is your one chance, boy, of going to it. But we drove up to Washington, and that's 4,000 miles.
Yeah.
Um, but I agree with you. If you live in Europe, stuff is very close, relatively speaking.
It's
You know,
either a train ride, I mean, a boat than train ride if you're on an island.
well, it's even if a flight, it's no different than flying from like Austin to Chicago.
Chicago, yeah,
Yeah,
it's not.
it's 1,000 miles, but 1,000 miles there, that's why I laugh. When we like here in Texas, like, oh, it's 3 hours. It's okay. That's kind of a long drive for the day, but it's not impossible. But the Europeans like that's a whole different country. Like, no, we never left Texas.
I don't know. It's like I said, there's parts of it where I miss. I can't give my daughter what the traveling around, and you do what you can with your kids for your kids, I guess. But I don't know.
Well, she looks like a pretty good kid because she cleans up around whenever we see her, wandering around behind you.
Oh yeah, she's an amazing little girl. She is way too smart for her own damn good.
Well, and you took her to see Cocaine Bear, you know.
I did, and her mom was so pissed.
Well, you also took her to see the D&D movie, didn't you?
Yeah, D&D movie. I dragged her to. I dragged her to the Mario movie.
So how are you being said? See, you can't compare yourself to your grandparents because what you have to really look at is why haven't your parents taken your daughter all over Europe if you're really going to do that? See, your job is to get her kids when
Yeah, well, yeah. I don't really trust my daughter with her mom or my. Well, my mom's okay. Her
well, you know what I
mom.
mean. It's just you're trying to compare it when there's a 2 generational gap. It's just like my parents are retired now and they have all the time in the world and they can go wherever they want, and yet they um, are they getting their passports? I think that they go most of their trips are to go see me, and every so often they like once a year they'll go travel somewhere for a week or two, and that's besides seeing me, and that's about it. Um, but to be fair, my mother lived in Japan at one point. My father lived in the Philippines and Germany. My mother was born in Italy. Um, my father, yeah, it, my mother when she came back from Europe says, "I am not traveling again." She's tired of it. Um, so it's like, all right. She did go to Hungary just to see some friends, but that's been about it. And
I mean,
the Hungarian friends come to see them too.
Baron mentioned that him and a group of friends are going over to Romania for a wedding, and I'm fucking happy that he's getting out of Illinois for a while,
I
even
always
if it
wanted to.
is for a couple days.
I wanted to go to Romania. I've known a couple of Romanians. One was a very attractive Romanian.
You'd get in trouble if you went to Romania.
I know because I would probably go travel all over to see the. I I'm not a city person. I like to go see the sights, so I probably go hit castles and try to go in the small villages and crap like that. get away from the big cities. I hate saying this. If you want to see France, do not go to Paris. Do not, I mean, if you want to go to Paris, go to Paris. But it's like saying Washington D.C. or New York or the United States. No, they're not. They're, if you want to go, I would rather. That's one of the reasons that, like, when my son and I travel, we go hit like all the little towns and the the rest stops and stuff like that. That's where you find the really cool Americana stuff. Is oh, hey, let's go over here, and so we would go eat the little local diners. I don't want to go to chains. I don't want to. It's the if you can go to a country, go to a country. Don't just when I went to Cambodia, okay, I was in Phnom Penh, but we did some work over in the village, and that's a whole other thing. I mean, it looks like stuff from the Vietnam movies.
I want to go to it's right out of California. It's the Canadian city north of Los Angeles. I can't think what it's called. I'm getting tired. Vancouver, because like 80% of my favorite shows were all filmed in that city.
I can't remember if Mage's Musings is up there.
What was the other thing that drove me crazy? You know that TV show Supernatural?
Yes.
There was an episode where they said they were in Peoria, Illinois, and I'm like watching the episode, looking for certain landmarks that only true Peoria people would know where they're. I'm like, they're not fucking Peoria. What kind of bullshit is this? But anyways. But no, I say when you get in trouble in Romania, I'm not saying with the city, not so much with the cities or anything. You find some beautiful woman over there, and we'll never see you again.
Well, that's true. Well. I was joking with my son. I said, I need you cloned. I said, this is why I would have loved to have 10 kids, because I need the labor.
How did he take to that?
He thought it was funny. I said, well, we'll just trade you off. You can go with your mom. One clone can stay with your mom. One can stay with me. And then and when you get fed up with one parent, we'll just swap you off. That way we always have one of you around.
That's funny. But it's not funny, but the whole cloning situation, the whole cloning.
I'm afraid of multiplicity. I've never seen the movie. I've just seen part of it.
The copy of the copy is retarded.
Yes. That's what I'm referring to. The more copies they have, the more flawed it is.
Oh yeah, no, I get you. As soon as you said, I'm like,
that's all I can think of.
Man, he Michael Keaton at one point was definitely one of my favorite actors, and he just like stopped doing it for a while and disappeared. He's back for the new Flash movie, for better or worse. He's back.
Well, he was for the Spider-Man movie. He was for Birdman or something like that. Yeah, it was I'm like, oh, okay. As much as everyone talks about everything being woke, I actually liked Spider-Man No Way Home.
I did too.
I like Tobey Maguire. They brought the other two old actors. I was like, holy crap, that's great. And then they brought back some of the the original villains, and I was like, cool, from the movies. But apparently, by my understanding is that Sony has to keep making a movie every 10 years or they lose the license.
Oh,
so that's why they'll just go in.
They know that fucking Spider-Man's a cash cow if they do it right, because they've done it wrong a few times.
Well, yeah. Well, Spider-Man 3, which we won't mention.
Actually, I might be in low here, but I really did like the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man.
I never saw it. It just seemed weird that I was like, what? I was joking about the Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, once you go gothic, you can't really go back with Spider-Man. You have to find a new actor.
Well, that's fine. I am. It's not that I mind.
What was the other thing I heard? That the studio basically pushed Venom on to the guy who directed that movie. He didn't want anything to do with Venom, but the studio
Oh,
pushed Venom on him.
that. Well, I think the problem is that if you look at the beginning, is they generally only had one villain, and then when they put multiple villains in the same movie, it loses the impact that it once
Yeah,
had.
because you got not the Osborn kid
Yep.
who's taking up the role as Green Goblin. Then you had the Sandman, which he wasn't even really a villain. He was more of a side character that was just pissed off for a little bit. Then you got Venom.
Yeah, you put too much in there. Now, don't get me wrong, is I did like the whole what they did with No Way Home, but it all kind of worked out because you understood where everyone was coming from.
Right.
But when you're introducing I guess part of it is that they were all established characters. When you introduce new characters, especially new villains, you don't give the time for the villain to properly develop, and I think that's part of the problem. Is you need time to let the villain develop as much as the hero, and if you throw everyone in at once,
No, I agree. I think honestly, watching the whole No, because I own No Way Home. Actually, I own all the Tom Holland Spider-Mans because I enjoy them for what they
Okay.
are. But I, other than having all three of the Spider-Man back, I think the guy who played Doc Ock actually is the one who stole the show.
Oh yeah, I love him. Well, he was my favorite anyway. I like yeah.
The actor who did him did well. Even the guy who played the Green Goblin. Oh God,
Yep.
what's his name?
I know you're referring
William
to.
Dafoe.
Yep.
William Dafoe's like, I will only come back to play the character if I get to be physical. If I'm not just
Yeah.
voice in the mask. And they're like, okay, if you sure. And he said he'd be willing to come back and do more Spider-Man movies.
Well, what I liked about it was well, they also did a good story. You felt sympathy. They did not shy away from killing Aunt May. I was like,
well, somebody had to go if there is no Uncle Ben.
so but to be fair, Sony is a Japanese company where they still believe in writers.
What was that? Oh my God. My daughter told me this joke I've heard before. How does she put it? What does Peter Parker, Luke Skywalker, and San Francisco have in common?
Their uncles died, or
No Uncle Ben.
oh, okay. Oh, geez. What gets me about it is that they gotta, like it's insulting having these characters on there, and I went, why? Speaking of which, I need to go. I told my son I was going to buy him Cousin T's pancakes. I because well, I was showing him the Terrence K. Williams stuff, and he thought it was pretty funny. I said, "Well, he put pancakes on there." Well, and I then he gets mad because Snoop Dogg decided to do his own brand of pancakes. He's like, "What the hell? Why does Snoop Dogg get a pass, but I don't?" He says, "No, he's going to have my face on there." It's all right. I need to go buy some Cousin T pancakes.
A pro wrestler. I mean, I know Mark. I can't think of his real name. The Undertaker has his own ball of wine out there. I'm not saying it's any good or not, but
you know what? What's amazing is I heard Snoop Dogg's for Lobster Thermidor. It was actually pretty good. The recipe for it.
Yeah.
And I went, well,
he's been hanging out with Martha Stewart for like last couple of years. Why not?
Well, hopefully not in jail.
They were pen pals. No, that's horrible. I should make those kinds of.
No, it's not horrible. I have no problems with it. As I kind of go, it reminds me of years ago. Like we talked about games, food and games. It brings people together.
Right.
And, while we can all joke about it, I can't be your friend anymore because you don't like X. Like, is this really where you're going to go? You like Spider-Man No Way Home? We can't be friends. Actually, I joked about that with Max earlier tonight when he went on there and said, well, I like the Starship Troopers. We can't be friends anymore. It's
Yeah, I completely missed this show tonight. I wasn't intentional. I just completely just missed it.
the part of the thing is that I enjoy the stuff he does on Sundays, but on Fridays, sometimes it becomes more of a bitch fest instead of if I like it whenever you just make fun of things, but at the end of the day, I sometimes just complaining about everything isn't that interesting anymore. It's like, okay, it's old. I like to have some positivity. Let's go
Yeah,
here.
I
Whenever
agree
I
with
hear
that.
him and Heathen Dog riff off of the stuff, that's fine. But the rants are funny up to a point, but they get old, and then you're like, okay, let me go look for someone new.
Oh yeah, I fucking last one I was on fucking set me off with the session, and I'm like, that's just I run. I run in a shop, and we get more than just fucking six sessions, and I'm like, this is our fucking bullshit. But and you said there was a poll that was taken, and I'm like, oh my god, this is
Well, here's a problem I have when people say 6 sessions. It's not that people don't want to play more than 6 sessions. It's usually the group breaks apart because someone has a baby, someone leaves or moves away, or that's why when I see the 6 sessions, look, they're saying that's the average. That's not what they're not saying is hey, how long would you like to play a campaign, and um, why did your group break up? And usually you'll find out it's some life. I got a new job. I had to move away. I got so and so got a girlfriend that they wanted to spend more time with. Life
bastard.
events occur. Now that we're in our 40s or 50s, um, most of the kids have moved away, and now we start having time to actually play the games. Like, well, what else are we going to do in the evenings? You know,
Yeah.
that's just like when you were what? Well, okay, not for you as much, but when I was a kid, it's all right. 15 or 16. What are we going to do? We'll go play Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, my 15, 16 year life was a little bit more complicated than most.
Yeah, well, you're there, but that's what I'm trying to say is it's not like I was going to parties and stuff, and even when I did, I didn't like to drink. I didn't like to. It's like, why? I don't like the taste. I don't like the way it makes me feel. Um, so it's like, okay, why would this be fun for me? um,
No, I get that. I don't know. I didn't really even in I did in college. That's realistically when a lot of my uh I should be doing this kind of kicked in. Um
well,
no, I
and
get
part of it
that.
also was is I had lived in Germany for a few years, and like, well, what's the big deal about drinking?
Oh
Oh,
yeah, no, I
it's you just look at people like, so what? Oh, I get to drink. Like, all right. Hey, guess what,
good for
guys? You get to,
you.
how many times did I watch my friends spend, you know, and I remember doing this sometimes, unfortunately, is they'd spend $100 on drinks and tipping the barmaid and everything else. And I went, guys, we could go to the liquor store and save up enough money to get to get a
It will
pool
be a
table.
whole lot cheaper.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. If we just done that, we could have we could have had, you know, a whole row of alcohol. We could gotten plastered. We would just, fall on the floor and then we get up again. We don't have to worry about,
No,
DUIs or anything else.
right. No matter how much you to tip her, she's still not going to go home with you.
No,
Yeah,
normally my friend did that to some strippers, and apparently they did.
yeah,
Um,
I dated a few strippers over the years, but that was a couple hundred
yeah.
pounds ago and a better job ago.
Well, and he also, he said the problem was that the stripper he's getting jealous. He's like, hey, it's
I never had that problem. Actually, most of the strippers I dated liked dating me because I didn't get jealous. Well, there was just no jealousy. and they came with their own fucking money. So
No, he didn't get jealous. They got jealous.
that, okay.
Because apparently he would go out and give money to other strippers, at the strip club. And
they thought that slush fund was theirs alone.
Well, I knew one guy which I thought was funny. So when I worked at Dell, his wife was a stripper, and he was talking about how much she was making per night, and he was not happy, not because she was stripping, but because she was earning 2 or 3 times as much as he was.
Yeah, I never quite understood that.
Well, it was kind of because he was talking about, she was making $800 a day or something.
Oh yeah. Oh god.
And he said the problem is that most women don't treat it like a job, and if they treat it like a job, they're making lots of money, but a lot of women did just enough to make enough money to do whatever they wanted, and they didn't save. He said, whereas he said one of the strippers was talking to his wife, and they're like, no, you can go to Dallas, you can go over to and I knew, so he and I would talk at night. Well, I went out with my friends one time, and we saw him in a movie theater with his wife, and I'm like, oh my god, that's his wife. I got a lap dance from him. I was just laughing at him. Yeah, okay. But no, it was they were making. Yeah, when you look at it, it's like, yeah, if you're gonna be stripping, buy a house, get everything out of the way, so you can do that for a couple of years, and then when you're done, and you keep your, this is the hard part, is you keep your lifestyle low. And then once you get, your house and your car and you do some investments, then you're pretty much set for life.
Yeah.
And the problem that many of them have is that they, as their income goes up, their spending goes up. And no, that's how you become poor. Especially as a stripper, because your licks start going down over time.
No, grandma's got the right of it.
Yep. As you reach a certain age, exactly, RPG grandma. Yeah, that's but I was just, but yeah, that's the unfortunate part, is that's hard to tell people, but I don't knock it. It's just one of those things of, if you're smart, you can do really well, and then or at least used to. I don't know what it is like now, but it's
neither do I, to be completely honest. I haven't.
I think I went to a strip club once, and I realized, why am I wasting my money? I'd rather waste it. So and then because they're like, because women are flopping their breasts at you, and I said, okay, and
to be fair, Ron White had the right of it. Once you've seen one pair, you basically want to see them all. All right. With that being said, I have game tomorrow that I need to be somewhat
cognizant
aware of, so Shauna doesn't make another video of me. Thank you, Shauna, for the few subscribers I got from that. I will be your thumbnail hero. God.
Yeah.
This is how much I really don't give a shit.
Wait a minute. Apparently Bruce is saying you don't have a game tomorrow. Or today.
I thought we did.
Well, he said we have a game tomorrow. Easter. I thought it was Easter.
Easter Sunday. I don't know. Either way, I got.
Well, Bruce will tell you.
Well, it's not his game.
Oh, okay. Which game are you playing with?
One of the other guys runs a game. Well, either way, I'm freaking tired.
All right. Well, have a good night.
Well, we'll find out tomorrow.
Nope.
All right, everybody out there in the chat, thank you for hanging out with us. I think tonight's been a really interesting conversation. We've kind of stayed nowhere on topic, but a topic all the same. Lots of stuff to think about, especially with the flooding situation, the floods and whatnot.
Well, I'm just glad we got some rain up here. I've got a little over an inch, and that means I don't have to wait. Hopefully, my cheese will be able to establish now.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Well, we're not doing anything this Sunday. There will be no Sunday show because it is Easter. I might do something on Easter. I might come on here, see who wants to come hang out. Because, well, single father whose kids spending Easter with their mom. So,
hey, I know that feeling.
For everybody else who and whoever else out there watches later, thank you for joining us at Misfit Island. And we'll see you when we see you.
Okay, good night.